Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Everyone was at the party yesterday, out late. So welcome to the 2D and GUI Q&A panel and roadmap and / something else. Here we'll try to answer all of your questions and maybe talk about the future and features that maybe you want to see, or maybe you want to find out why we went with certain decisions. So feel free to ask questions anytime. I'm Tomas, and with me today is Philip, Juha, and Michael. Let's start. Anyone has anything that you want to know? Okay. Movie textures. What about them? Possibly. I'm afraid this is not something we are actually working on, like the people on stage. Anyone else? Would you mind using the microphones? There's two of them.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. The Rage tools does a good job with the SVG and the vector graphics and spline support, but it seems so core to the engine. If the people that make the Rage tools, got hit by a bus, we'd be out support for that. What's your plans for putting that into the core engine?
Yeah, so vector graphics makes a lot of sense, right? The screens are not getting smaller, and vector graphics works on any res, so I can see the point of making such a system. But on the other hand, it's not really an easy thing to do. So when we started doing 2D stuff, we basically made a decision that we'll first do sprites and do it well, and maybe then we'll think about vectors. But I mean, I can't really make any promises. But it's something that we'll at least research at some point. So it's safe to say that it's not going to happen in the near future.
You heard it here first, boss. He's going to do it.
Also, as a transition, we are currently researching 2D skinning. So pretty much you take a sprite, you draw your bones on it, and you can manipulate it. So that's not true vector art, but it's a stepping stone. I think many of you will like it whenever we finish it. Anyone else? Also, just if you want to see actually happening something happening in the editor, you can ask us to demo it. We have laptops here.
Hi, I was just wondering how easy it would be to use the new 2D tools with previous 3D editors, or for example, with the nav mesh component and stuff like that. For example, if I want to create a top-down strategy game, is it supported?
There is no nav mesh integration with the new 2D things in 4.3.
Okay, then that's a wish list, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I'm just wondering if you could give us an idea of what kind of editor API we're going to have for both the 2D and for the GUI. Just a general overview of what we'll be able to control.
For the sprite creation, you can fully create new sprites from scripts. There's a sprite.create call where it takes a texture and some parameters to cut out the rectangle. Also, you can use the mesh generation to initialize the alpha cutout for rendering, and all of that is available for physics meshes as well. Sprite render is, of course, a simple component to script, just like any other renderer. And what else is there? Sprite packing. That is all done using existing setup in the editor. So you set up everything on the asset database and just call a function to regenerate the atlases based on the setup. And as for GUI, maybe Michael can explain.
Might be easier to just show it, actually.
Maybe we should start with 2D and move on to GUI. Just show some of the things in action. Would that help? Let's get it done.
So what was the...
Scripting API. But I mean,
Maybe you're going to do.
yeah, maybe we should just do GUI this time. I don't think we have 2D prepared.
Yeah.
Sure. So for scripting in particular, I wanted to make sure that everything is actually accessible from the scripts, that is accessible from the inspector. Awesome, it actually works, nice. So, for example, let's make a sprite here. And not gonna touch this. Sure, explosion. So everything you see here, like pivots and size, for example, color, sprite type, material, all of this is actually changeable from the script itself. So if you go, that would be in GUI system. Hello, there we go. So all this stuff is, since the code is actually going to be available for you, you will be able to see exactly what we're doing, how we're doing it, and change it if you need to. Stuff that you see here, like specifying a material, for example, you will be able to specify it as well. The way material is actually used is it essentially goes into the UI renderer here, and UI renderer accepts geometry and a material to work with, and it'll just create the mesh for you, which will then get bashed by the canvas and so on. All the other properties, they're accessible, like fill method, for example. If you specify, I don't know, slice, tiled, filled, whatever, you'll be able to ignore this argument exception. You'll be able to specify additional properties that control how it is actually filled, and so on. And all of this is available from code. Labels, it's the same thing. I cannot type this morning. There we go. So, you know, everything that you would expect, text, whether it supports encoding, password, and so on and so forth. Everything that you can do from the inspector and from here is actually doable from the code as well. And in fact, everything you see up here is actually created using code. I'm a developer. I cannot make something that does not work from code. I hate it. It irritates me. Is there anything in particular you want to know about the way GUI is currently set up right now before I give it to the 2D? Do I have control over the sprite sheet? In which matter?
The sprite editor? Yeah, the sprite editor.
Yeah. If you go to the sprite itself and you open up a sprite editor, there you can actually modify whatever you want. You know, move them around if you need.
Or via API.
Oh, that's actually a question for the 2D because it's done in
I'm
3D.
working on it, so maybe give me a few minutes. See if it actually works in the beta. So.
Yes,
You
but
want the
for
download
the
thing?
final
Yeah,
4.3
just
release,
maybe another question in the between.
I just want to add that for the final 4.3 release, we will have the API exposed on the texture importer, so you can define all the sprite data.
So it's not exposed?
It might be.
Okay.
It's a beta. Can we move on to the next question, please?
First off, the tools are awesome. Great work on that. My question is, could you show a demo of how you would make an HD and an SD atlas for covering multiple resolutions and DPIs?
There are no atlases. That's the thing. You work with images. So currently you would replace one image with the other. Automatic way of handling this is something we currently have on our roadmap. It is not in this build.
Maybe you want to show the multiplier.
Yeah, just to add to that, there's a pixels to units multiplier which controls how big your generated geometry is for that sprite. So if you adjust that so that it matches the difference in your texture size, you can have the same mesh with different fidelity texture. And then just swap the sprite references.
Can you show it? Just show show it. He has some assets in.
Just keep in mind, it's a different version of the 2D stuff.
Yeah, it looks good enough. So here, example, we have the smiley face.
Mouse is to your right.
To D.
You will have to zoom in.
What the
Not
hell?
in Photoshop.
How do I?
Double click on the sprite you dragged in. That's UI sprite. Emoticon laugh, I'm guessing, is what you dragged in.
That's fine. I can probably use this.
That's our sprite. It's a UI sprite.
All
There
right,
you
we'll
go.
use our sprite. Okay, so you now have a sprite in the scene with a certain dimension, and assuming you import an image that's twice the size, the actual mesh will grow. So what you want to do is you want to change this to say 50. If you imported an image that's twice the size, and then you would have an adjusted mesh. So in this case, the image is the same. I'm just changing the output mesh size. Hope that ends. Yeah, you can use it with that. So you can have an asset bundle where you have large textures and the ratio is set to, let's say, 200, and another. Oh, no, that's not going to be in 4.3. No. You still need to do whatever you have to do before. It's just slightly easier now. Okay.
Yeah, in case of the GUI, it's something that is on roadmap. It's a nice to have for shipping feature, but yeah, we'll see if we can actually get it in before we ship. Depends on time.
Next question here, please.
Yeah, could you give me an example of the GUI layer system and how you would set those up?
GUI layer system?
Yeah.
Certainly.
Thanks.
So delete this guy. So here I've got a very ugly sprite that I'm going to change. Okay. And I'm going to add another sprite beside it. This sprite will be here, for example. So here I've got one sprite on top of the other. I wanted to bring it back. Now the way I do it is actually, there's several ways of doing it. For example, move to back. Now it's in the back. Also there are hotkeys like Control minus, Control plus. It works the same way with any object. Like it doesn't have to be a sprite. For example, if I have a group object here, like some button, for example, and have one guy here, I can actually change the order of the game object the same way as I would with the sprite. So currently where it's located is here. Move to front, move to back. The hotkeys, Control minus, Control plus. But yeah, ideally there should be some more intuitive way of doing it rather than going through the menu. So we'll think about it. For the time being, the functionality is there, it's just we're not 100% sure of where it's going to be yet. Does that answer the question?
Sorry, no. You had mentioned previously, like I think it was in the tag system, where you would set up like manual layers for the rendering of the UI components. Did I not understand that correctly?
That's not actually the GUI layering system. That's actually the 2D layering system that's in there at the moment.
Oh, okay.
There are unfortunately different systems at the moment, and that will change.
You want a demo?
Yeah, we can't. We don't have the latest. It would have to be yours.
Oh, you want to show this?
Actually.
So the layering system is a
Plug it in.
new thing you can use to reorder all renderables, be it 2D or 3D meshes or particle systems. And it's just like it adds on to existing render sorting algorithm. So first you get the layers, then you get the depth, and then you get the existing sorting on Z or whatever else you use to sort your renderers. So what was the actual question about it?
How's it work? How do you use it?
Well, could you give an example of usage of it?
Okay, Juha's about to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna make some assets now. So. Okay, this is hard to do at the same time. So yeah, you have this selection here on the sprite render. It says sorting layer, right? And this is default now. And if we want to add some sorting layers, this is how it's gonna be done. Let's say that we have a background layer. And a foreground layer. Was this actually the question, right? Okay. And say this is on the background. This guy's on the foreground. And oops, a little UI box here, but
They're not bugs. They're just misinterpreted features.
cool. But this is like the most basic demo of the feature, I guess. And then in addition, you have this value here where you can set like a sub order value inside the layer. And yeah, let's put them on the same layer. I was going to say that this is not limited to sprite render, right? It's on all renders, so you can do your own mesh render or whatever rendering object you have and use this layer. So let's use that value now. If I put the -1, you can see it goes back and goes 1. Actually, I have a question for Tomas. What happens if they're on the same layer and same number? Is the normal Unity mode undefined behavior?
Sometimes it's undefined, but usually it's sorting by Z value, then by render queues, materials, and all of that stuff.
So let's assume all are same, C is same, material is same.
Then
Like
probably
which
instance
one
ID.
instance? Yeah. Okay.
It's probably based on the order of transforms. The order in which transforms appear in the parent.
What do you think? What does the audience think? Like, should the hierarchy order have a meaning in the ordering, or should it be something else?
So what Juha is trying to ask you is, we had this experiment where we made the hierarchy tree reorderable, so you can drag things around and set the depth that way. And we couldn't actually get it stable enough into 4.3. But do you think that would be something that you would use? Can you raise your hand if you think that's a good idea? So less than half, I think. It's probably more programmers raising their hands, because artists, I was told, are not very fond of the idea of rearranging the hierarchy to layer things. Could you use the microphone, please?
Would that cause even more problems with version control? Because like we try to touch our scene as little as possible. We're always moving stuff around.
Potentially for merging, yeah. It could cause controls if you're reordering a lot.
Then I feel like it's more confusing than once you add in all the other ways that things can be sorted. So you'd have things in the right order in the hierarchy for the sorting way you wanted, but they'd also be sorted by material or sorted by something else. And then I think if it's hierarchy first is like the boss of sorting, so to speak, then you're going to get really efficient scenes really quickly.
Yeah, so it would be just hierarchy first for the subtrees that you actually mark to be sorted.
That sounds pretty good.
Okay. Shall we move on, please?
Hi, yeah, I had a question. I was wondering if there were any plans for changes to the font system. Currently with that using Atlas-based fonts, unless you have like really large fonts, they can not always be the smoothest when you render to different resolutions and devices. And I'm just curious if there are any planned tools for like, potentially smoothing fonts or even vector-based fonts.
The font system actually changed recently. Fortunately, Tim is not here to talk about it. He's the one that changed it for the GUI. So it's a lot easier to use now, and everything in the GUI actually uses dynamic fonts right now. It doesn't use bitmap fonts. But in regards to like having special effects on it, such as smoothing effects and so on and so forth, we haven't actually done any of that stuff. I mean, you could actually use a shader on the label and make it appear something, like a gradient, for example. It's really, really easy to do. Or have even a pattern on it of some kind. It's very easy to do. But like no effects on the font glyphs themselves. Although this does give me an interesting idea, and I will think about it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. What are the plans for pixel perfect sprites and working with cameras to make sure they stay locked to pixel perfect positions and that sort of thing? Is there any plans or upcoming plans for that?
So in 4.3, we are shipping a default material for sprites which will have a snap to pixel option. So if you check it, the vertices will be snapped to precise positions as long as you have your sprites unscaled and the camera set up so it actually matches.
And for people that like to show, for instance, pixel art at double or triple or quadruple size, any plans for that?
So if you just scale your sprite like 2x, you can still use the same material and it will snap correctly.
Right, but it would snap to the smallest size pixel, the like actual pixels instead of like double size pixels, right?
Yes, but that's all you need. You just move your. Also, you want to have like on-screen pixels that are twice the size.
Yeah.
So then you set your camera to have a smaller field of view.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So what if you can set the sorting order of the sprites to like move backwards and forwards, and you can as well set the sorting order? How do you know what decides what?
Sorry, could you repeat that? We didn't hear it.
You could set like the sort order of the sprites.
Yes.
And you can as well move them back and forth, like with control plus minus. So does that affect like the sorting order integer or?
Those are actually two different systems at the moment. We have one thing in GUI and one thing in 2D.
Yeah, what GUI actually did is the default system, the way it works is the order in which renders kind of appear. It depends on two things. First is the distance to from the eye of the camera to the object, the center of the object. That one is actually not used in the GUI right now on purpose. It is actually purposely based on the other value, which is the order in which transforms appear in a parent's hierarchy. So literally, if you actually iterate through all the children of the parent, the order in which they appear is the order in which they would get drawn. And we actually made it modifiable in the new system, so you can actually move things back and forward, controlling this value. You can currently do this in a hacky way, actually, by removing the transform or multiple transforms and adding them in the order that you want them to be, but we felt that was way too hacky, and we just added a native way to do that. So the control minus, control plus controls exactly that.
The two systems probably will actually get unified in some nicer way. It's just GUI's well behind 2D, so.
Yeah.
I have a question maybe for Michael. I was wondering, does the UI system have anchoring of UI elements? And
yes.
If it does, could you show an example?
Sure. Okay, so for example, I have this guy here, and I want this sprite to always be attached to, say, over here. What I would do is actually I would attach an anchor. I would specify the other sprite as a widget container, and I would specify the right size as the anchor point. So now when I move this sprite, the other sprite moves with it, even though they're just siblings. Of course, I can just simply get rid of the anchor and parent the two sprites, and it'll have the same effect.
How would you do that attach button to the side of the screen, which would work across different devices?
It's the similar way. So for example, if I have this button here and it's actually based on top left corner, and I want to attach it to the top left corner as well, I would attach an anchor here. I would specify top left. I would not, top left. I would not specify any kind of widget container here, which defaults to the screen. So now the button is actually up here. Of course, I should change that. There, top left.
That's great, thanks.
I was a bit confused by the to back to front. What about like to middle? I mean, what does that exactly entail? Because if you have 3 sprites and you want, like you do this in GUI all the time, you have your background sprite, then you have your button, and then you have your label. How do you make sure that those are going to be oriented like you want?
You just, basically, currently, you can bring them up or back or forward in the order that you want them to be, one at a time. We have considered making it like it is in GUI, where you just move it forward or back by 1 unit at a time. Hey, Tim. We might do that. We are not 100% certain yet. Like, this entire system is actually a prototype right now, so it might happen, it might not. We'll see. It depends on our usability testing, basically.
Okay. So, follow-up question would be, how much longer are you going to be supporting GUI then before people make this transition?
And GUI will be supported as long as people use it.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Hey, what up? So this might be a stupid question, but I was playing with the beta, and from everything I've heard, I don't understand how to create an asset bundle with an atlas that's auto-created from the sprite packing.
How to create an asset bundle with an atlas?
Yeah, one of the atlases that's auto-created with the sprite packer.
You don't. That is completely hidden to you. Atlases are completely hidden from the user. Right. You work with the original sprites, basically. You don't work with atlases.
That could be a big problem. When you're submitting to iOS, there's a chance you don't get an app update. I mean, as fast as possible, 3 days, maybe 12 days. So we like to keep as much stuff in asset bundles as possible so we can update people on the fly. So if I wanted to update a character's animation, I don't want to wait 10 days for iOS to approve my app. So if I could keep my animations in an asset bundle, my atlases, I mean, that's a huge advantage.
Yes. Well, you can actually have your own atlas. Like, for example, this sprite here, the explosion sprite, is just one texture that contains many sprites inside. Nothing is preventing you from creating just that. You know, the way you would create an atlas in GUI right now is you would add things to an existing atlas, right? But you can just do this in Photoshop to begin with. You can have all your sprites inside one texture, and you just import this one texture.
Yeah, no, we do that already. So basically, you can't do that if you're going to use the sprite packer.
I think that what you meant is the sprite packer, yes? That we showed during the 2D talk. So that works completely transparently, and when we generate the atlas, we replace the texture references in the sprite asset. So essentially, if you include that asset in the asset bundle, it will pull in whatever texture is referencing. It can be the original one or the atlas one.
Okay, cool.
So that means that if you have an asset bundle with sprites as inputs, they will pull in the atlas in which they live.
Okay, and then another question. So, if I understood correctly, so I have like, let's say, 10 sprites, and half of them are 16-bit compression, and the other half are 32-bit. You're going to automatically put it into atlases for me.
Yes.
Is there a way in the sprite packer to just select all of those and force all of them to 32, or do I have to go into all of them and update them to 32?
Currently, there's no way to force them to be in the same atlas. I think we'll have an option where you can put 24-bit textures, like with no alpha, into an atlas with alpha. But for other compression types, we'll ask you to set the settings on each of the texture importers.
Oh, okay, cool, thanks.
You're welcome. Who was next?
Can I show you?
Please.
Yeah, so you guys are doing a lot of really cool stuff with texture atlas creation. I was wondering if there were any plans to expand that and make it usable for 3D stuff or static batching.
So atlasing was built specifically for the sprite assets, but during the conference, many people expressed the desire to have that for 3D as well, so we'll have to investigate it as well.
Thanks.
And now we want to come back to the question that we had at the beginning, where you asked about the extendability of the texture importer.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this actually was the original question, but there's some scripting here, so close enough. So this is basically how would you make your own importer. Say you already have the metadata, like you're importing an atlas, you know where your sprites already are, you have the data somewhere. So you can make this like your own importer. It's pretty easy. You can't see?
Nope.
What is it?
Control plus? Nope.
Oh.
Control Alt plus? Something? Shift plus? There you go.
Cool. So, so it's not many lines of code, right? You get this is on pre-processed texture, which is something that happens before the texture importer does its thing. So first we get the importer, then we just ask for the sprite sheet. I mean, you don't have to ask for the sprite sheet. There might be no sprite sheet. You can start empty, but here I'm for the demo purposes, I'm getting the old one that already exists in the importer. And what I'm doing here is I'm just shifting every sprite 10 pixels to the right. So you can see I'm taking the old rect and shifting 10 pixels right, and then I just put the data back into the importer. And we can see here that if I go to the texture importer, I need to change something here so I can trigger the import. And when I press apply, this guy should shift 10 pixels because because what happened here is that my script shifted this 10 pixels right. I can show it here. If I apply, it does it again, again. Again, so this is how you could make your own importer pipelines to do whatever you want.
So in other words, if you wanted to screw someone over, give them the script.
You showed the demo before of dragging a bunch of sprites to make an animation. Is there a time scale setting or like a separate frame rate for that, or does it always go at the same frame rate as the movie?
So because it's using the animation system that we use for anything else, you can, in the controller, set the playback speed of an animation clip. And the animation clip can be authored in any frame rate that you want.
Thanks.
Yes, next one.
My question too, involving animation, so I'm good.
Could you show us an example of clipping sprites? Like I used 2D Toolkit and
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Clip sprites, like clipping 2D sprites?
I think that's for the GUI, I suppose.
No, so basically, let's say a square sprite, I want to display 75% of it, like chop off the bottom part.
Yeah.
At runtime. Does that make sense?
Not GUI, just in 2D, can you clip sprites?
Yeah, can you clip sprites in 2D?
No, we cannot clip sprites right now. You could...
Actually, you could use the stencil exactly the same way we do it in the GUI.
You could use the stencil for this.
Yep.
Sorry?
Could you show that?
I can show how it is in the GUI.
Yeah, but the same material would apply for everything else as well.
Yep. Since you are actually specifying a material for a sprite, like for example here, I want to specify a material that writes to stencil. I believe it is called stencil mask. Yep. So now stencil mask has a shader on it that writes to stencil 1. So essentially the entire area covered by the sprite is now going to be marking the stencil buffer. Now this sprite, for example, if I wanted this sprite to be clipped by the other sprite's area, I would actually need to use a material on it that would be using stencil 1. So this one, I think. Yeah, see, it's getting clipped. Let me make it bigger to make it easier to see. There. You can actually, if you use a different sprite that has rounded edges, like this one, for example. Man, it's kind of hard to see. Let's see if I can find another one. Just even this one. You can actually get curved edges.
If atlases are that transparent, how would we control the memory they are taking? What would be the workflow?
The question was, how do you control the memory of atlases? Is that right?
Yeah. For instance, I want to know exactly at runtime what atlases I have in memory and how much of that.
So we have the sprite packer window, which gives you a preview of what atlases are generated. And we plan, by the time 4.3 ships, let you figure out what sprites go on what atlases and, figure out if the atlases is misformed or, you want to change something. So you'll have a few options to do that. At runtime, it will be just normal textures loaded, so you can use the profiler to figure out what's in memory. And regarding the atlases themselves, we try to pack them really well and downscale them to the minimum possible size.
I've been working and just playing around with the new 2D system, and I noticed I composed more or less a character that's composed of smaller sprites, and when it overlaps a duplicate of that sprite, they intersect because of the layering. I was wondering how you're going to handle that.
Yeah, so this is the use case that we're trying to figure out of the hierarchy sorting, and we couldn't do it in time for 4.3. The way that I would solve this eventually is to have parts of the hierarchy be for sorting described as one renderer. But since we cannot do that, there's workarounds that you can do. For example, write a script which offsets all of your renderers on the same layer depth to a different depth, for example.
Is that for 4.3 or later?
Yeah, you can use it using the existing layering system. Okay. Or, for example, you can still use the Z property and offset your subsprites that way, and then just put every character on a different depth on a layer.
I don't think Z ordering works. I tried it.
Sorry?
Z ordering with 2D sprites. I don't think it works in this build right now.
Oh, I think we can demo that, can't we, Juha?
Demo what?
Just having two sprites on the same layer, same order, and just changing their Z values. That should work. Okay, meanwhile, please.
If it doesn't work, should we file back?
You have the anchor component for dynamically positioning UI elements. I was curious if there's a component for dynamically scaling them, like to have components with flexible widths or heights.
Yep, stretch.
Stretch. Perfect. Thanks.
So what was it? I put two sprites on the same layer?
Same layer, same depth.
Same layer, same depth, just change the Z value.
working
Yeah,
as
so right
intended.
now we see the something you probably see often, the sorting issue with Z, but if Juha changes that to like 0.1 or something on the star, red star, can you do that, please?
Change the Z value.
Ah, okay. So I make a script and change it?
No. Just inspector.
Sorry, I don't understand.
In 3D, the distance, or rather the order of objects is always based on the distance from the center of the object to the eye point of the camera. So when you're moving the camera like that, it's obviously causing the object to be closer or further away. But if you change the Z value, then you kind of force it. Yeah, it's still glitching out, but yeah, that's the part where you either use an orthographic camera or adjust the Z value. It's the same problem that a lot of users found very difficult in GUI to get their heads around, basically. And part of the reason why we scrapped that in the new UI system altogether and actually made it not do that. We're not sorting anything based on the distance to the camera anymore. We're forcing the order. 2D doesn't currently do that with just the default values.
So I just got to ask, is there any ETA on the new UI systems coming out?
4.x.
End of the year, 2015?
We had a date 3 days ago, just before the conference, but we were told not to reveal it, so we cannot say anything.
Any more questions?
Bueller. By the way, you can actually come over our hands-on labs and actually try this out yourselves. If you want to play with the GUI or with the 2D system right then and there, you can do it.
I got one more quick question.
Go for it.
Can the 2D go into a render target?
Yeah, no problem.
I was curious about large textures for backgrounds. When they're imported, are they like tessellated highly so you get the culling, or how's that going to work?
So you mean, do we split it into separate pieces and cull parts of it?
Right.
What would that benefit exactly?
Well, I mean, for huge textures for your background, like for your whatever you're doing, like scrolling backgrounds or whatever.
Yes.
I mean, you don't want to draw everything that's not on the camera if it's all one texture.
Well, those parts of texture won't be drawn anyway.
Okay.
So there's no real performance penalty for having that. However, you can split up your large texture using the slicer into parts and then control it manually if you need to. Okay, any more questions? I think we have 5 more minutes.
Just curious, how tightly do you plan on having the 2D and the UI stuff integrated?
As tightly as we can.
Are there plans for like automated UI panels, such as stack panels, wrap panels, uniform grids, anything to allow for DPI and resolution, orientation, and aware layouts?
It's kind of several questions in one. The grids, yeah, you can use placement grids to automatically position objects. It's quite easy to use. It's just a component that positions the children of its transform, basically. As far as everything else, basically everything that was there in the GUI is still going to be there in this UI system. It's just with a whole bunch of different improvements. Is it going to be very easy to use right off the bat? Hopefully. We'll see.
Hi, I was just wondering if there's a snapping functionality for 2D.
You mean vertex snapping?
Yes.
Yeah, we have that in 3D mode in beta 1, and it's coming in 2D mode in another beta.
Thank you.
Juha can probably demo it, right?
Sure.
So demo it.
You can do it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Magic.
It's okay. Any more questions?
Yeah. How are render textures going to be treated in regards to atlas and everything like that?
They don't get added to an atlas. They just get drawn. So it'll be like an extra draw call, basically.
Actually, yeah, I'm kind of new to 2D, so I just have a question in terms of texture sizes. Let's say, for example, on, I don't know, iPhone 3G or an iPad, the texture size is 1024. If in your sprite packer, if I do have a huge background, let's say 2048, does it chop it up for me, or do I need to do something special to handle that special case?
So for some reason you want a smaller texture of the atlas.
Right, because so for example, I have a big sprite, say a really large sprite because I'm doing stuff in HD and on a desktop, but physically on the mobile, the texture sizes can't really be that big. So do you guys do any handling to kind of determine what the device is and then make sure that the textures and sprites that I use can fit? So maybe you would chop it up internally and then make your atlases reference and stitch up internally as well.
So in 4.3 we don't do that, but it's been already suggested yesterday that we do cut the larger sprites into pieces. So not only it helps in this case, but also it packs better in the packer. So we'll definitely research this for 4.x.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Cool.
Okay, thank you very much.